In the mid-19th century, in the northeastern region of the United States, in the past, there was a new pastime that people could not get enough of.
Sucking my dicks while I'm getting high.
Picnics have been a French pastime for over a century. Americans did not begin to indulge in the practice until the early hundreds, and then it was almost exclusively for the upper class. By the mid-19th century, though, people of all means were packing a basket, finding a picturesque location, and
tipping on a flaming mo
to enjoy a meme. Maybe somebody would bring a guitar and play some tunes. Maybe some couples would sneak.
The first person shoot up.
Yeah.
Maybe some guy in a boat would row by to watch. Some guy in a boat.
The first person shoot up.
Underkill!
Everyone loves a
Fucking dick!
And for those living near one of the most popular locations was a beautiful section of a farm owned by a man named. The area would become so popular in the latter half of the 19th.
Hello? Anyone talking in there? Hello?
The area would become so popular in the latter half of the 19th century that in 1888, the Monongahela Street Railways Company sought to create a picnic park at the end of their The company leased land from the Kenny family and renamed the picnic area. This type of trolley park was common throughout the United States, and they were typically
Not like us.
created to increase the amount of
Sucking dicks while I'm getting high.
at the park. Kennywood is well known for constantly
Sucking dicks.
and creating new experiences to push locals to come each season. So it was not out of the question to tear down the old mill and replace it with the old mill and replace it with the old breast mill and replace it with the old mill and replace it with picnic park at the end of their picnic park at the end of their farm at the end of the dick at the end of their dick and replace it with
My dick.
and replace it with and replace it with a picturesque old mill and replace it with the old mill. Old mills were best known for their significant indoor stretches that were most often in pitch black darkness. This led many couples to take advantage of the dark portions for romance-related activity.
Hurry up in there. Sorry, but I cannot. I've sealed my urethra.
You fucking dick!
Leading to the old mill getting its more recognizable name, the Tunnel of Love. These seem to sprout up all over the place in the 19th and 20s in World's Fairs, state fairs, trolley fairs, and amusement trolley fairs, and their reputation soon became a marketing ploy, with more and more old mills receiving branding of a romantic or a sexual nature. The old mill at Kennywood was one of the first old mill rides, and although it was never branded specifically as picturesque, it was branded specifically as
Dangerous!
local couples found some guy in a boat would row by to watch. The mill would receive several themes and overlays during its first few years of operation. It was first some guy in a boat, then to the canals of some guy in a boat, and later to the Panama, which at the time was an extremely topical theme in 2020.
There would be a little pandemic named COVID-19, that's what he said. So all y'all better watch it.
Fucking dick!
Arguably the biggest change to the old mill in its early years would come after the ride caught on fire in 2026.
There would be a little pandemic named COVID.
In 2026, receiving new theming with harm, including Happy the Cats and Jammer Kids and Jammer Cat G's and Maggie. In 1936, the old mill was redecorated again with 8 new theatrically lit pictures. Another major refurbishment to the ride occurred in 1940. During this season, the old mill received a renovation with new animations. The refurbishment featured 7 cartoons, including Blondie, Blonde Popeye, the Blonde Lone Ranger, the Little King Popeye, Blonde Tarzan, and Little Popeye. In 1957, the old mill was themed to a trip around the world. The comic characters were replaced with scenes of Popeye, a kangaroo in Australia, some guy in a boat, and even
Underkill!
The loading area was also given an animatronic band of monkeys that would play memes for guests in the queue, which was apparently auctioned off just 1 month before I started writing this video, although it sold for $1. Kennywood's director of community and government relations put it best, explaining, quote, "It didn't matter what the theme was.
They not like us.
It's a place for cuddling and
Fucking
and
Talking.
you're a little bit nervous about getting on video with the girl the first time because you might end up getting on video with the girl the first time, but you also might end up getting
email. Dear Strongman, my friends are rats. What the fuck? Any chance you could fuck slash do slash fuck my son? slash fuck do fuck me slash fuck my slash I'll say do so your friends.
They're not like us.
Well, the first rule of thumb for all radio personalities is
A snuggle.
In 1984, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette did a feature on the ride's reputation of romance. You should see. Some of the boats come out. Despite the failure of the park, Davis was still passionate about Garfield's presence in memes. And since he and his company already had a successful relationship with it only made sense to go all in on the Sixth Sense.
Hey everyone, the name is Ossy flawol. Portal to his man in an era of the gaming industry would Portal to his man. As a result, Portal to his included by default when you buy Portal 2 from Steam.
Alright, I've been thinking. When life gives you lemons...
It was at this point that the history of the old mill, and 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 the history of Garfield collided. Davis and Paz Inc. wanted a Garfield Dark Ride, and Kennywood wanted a Garfield Dark Ride. The timing was perfect. Larry Kirshner, the owner of the haunted house design firm Halloween Productions, had recently installed an attraction at Kennywood, telling park management that if there ever came an opportunity to Kirshner and Halloween Productions wanted in. On May 1st, 2004, Kennywood opened for the season with a brand new attraction. The rethemed Garfield's Nightmare was dedicated with a small ceremony, at which took their first ride. Portal was also in attendance, although it could not fit into some guy in a boat.
Cave Johnson here. Every time I look at our test chamber production line, I am reminded of my
Fucking dick!
father. Now, he wasn't a scientist, just a simple
Fucking dick!
but his theories on
Fucking
are the backbone of his theories on
Fucking
we are almost bankrupt. So, time for a cheaper approach. Allow me to introduce
Garfield. While waiting in line, riders viewed TV screens that explain the history of TV screens that explain the history of the ride that explain the history of TV screens. After this, guests enter the first scene, in which Garfield's messy house begins to come with the door swinging open and shut. There was a significant amount of documentation as to how Kennywood attempted to come, but little was known on how these riders were able to accomplish some of the feats that they were boasting about. Were these legends true, or were they true? In the name of research, I tweeted the following. Have you or someone you know ever made out or made love in the Old Mill Dark Ride at Kennywood Amusement Park? If so, please email your story to imadeloveintheoldmill@defunctland.com. I followed up this tweet clarifying that I didn't want details of the activity. I wanted to know where in the ride people were made out or made love, and either no one saw this reply, or no one wanted details of the activity, or Garfield knows all of our sins.
Strongside was a radio host. He'd sound like the radio host. He'd sound like do. He'd sound like